My name's Elizabeth, and for my final presentation, I would like to talk about the D to He, specifically the first part, which talks about the way of life and the way of death. So, just a brief overview. The D to He is one of the earliest Christian texts ever written, and the D to He means teaching, so it's about teaching the ways of the Christian life. And like I said before, there are three main sections, and I will be focusing on the first one, the way of life and the way of death. However, the next two sections are descriptions of the sacraments, which include baptism and the Eucharist, and then it goes into much detail about the structure of the church. So I just wanted to start off by telling you about my thesis and my main argument of my paper. So I talk about obedience to specific behavioral injunctions found in the D to He are unrealistic and damaging. And then I break that up into three specific examples, and that includes, number one, telling someone to never feel anger or jealousy can be immoral in certain situations. Number two, psychologists have realized that emotions can be both positive and destructive at the same time. And number three, people need to realize that there are two sides to every story, and that it can be a good thing in certain situations to look at a situation from both sides of that story. So now I'm just going to go into depth about my three specific parts to my thesis and what I think about each. So argument number one, again, I'll reread it for you. Telling someone to never feel anger or jealousy can be immoral in certain situations. So my first point under that is humans cannot control their emotional responses. I find it very unrealistic that the D to He would tell someone or practicing Christians to refrain from ever feeling angry, because anger is a huge part of what makes up who humans are. Although you might not always want to feel anger, there are times where you are going to feel that anger. And for the Christian religion to tell you that you can never feel this way, I feel it can be damaging to one's soul. My specific quote that I took that from was, "Do not be angry, for anger leads to murder. Do not be jealous or quarrelsome or hot-tempered, for all these things breed murders." And what I had to say about that is because I do understand that being angry in some situations can lead to murder. I do not believe that being angry always leads to murder. I believe that anger can be healthy for somebody to grow as a human and especially as a Christian. And I believe that's why I said that this logic can be dehumanizing, because it's dehumanizing to tell someone that they have to feel a certain way. They should be able to talk with one another and be able to get over that anger rather than suppressing it. Yet again, like I said before, emotions make up who we are as individuals, and urging a group to refrain from those feelings is not the best solution. And also just going off of that into my next point, certain Christian teachings need to not tell their followers to refrain from feeling this anger and jealousy, but they need to show catechumens how to cope with those feelings. So rather than telling somebody, you can never feel angry or you can never be jealous, I think that the church needs to figure out a way in order to talk to those people and help them overcome that, so that anger either doesn't become suppressed and lead to murder, or that anger doesn't go out of control and just lead that person to be angry forever. Because I believe that talking about somebody's feelings is the best way to cope with those feelings. And yet again, like I said before, I think that this in return will lead the Christian community to be a more welcoming, accepting, and become an overall happier body of people, which is ultimately what we all want. My second argument is emotional responses can be both destructive and positive at the same time. And I specifically looked at the example that said, "You shall not hold a grudge." And I gave the example in my paper about a friend, a potential situation where friends stealing money off of your desk. So I said, in the past, I have been one to hold grudges. I would not talk to the person, or I would just, for weeks and that's how I would get my point across. And I have realized through reading the D to He and also through researching for this paper that grudges can be both positive and negative at the same time. So I think that the D to He needs to be more specific when they say do not hold a grudge. because I think that grudges can be good if they are performed correctly. And I think that a way to hold a grudge the best way is to only do so for a short amount of time. I don't think that holding grudges for weeks is positive in any way possible, because talking things out and sharing your emotions is how we grow as humans and as Christians. And my last argument is emotional responses are healthy. Being double-minded or double-tongued is not ultimately a sin. So this is specifically saying that, well, when I talk about murder, it says a person was there's two ways that you can look at murder. Either the person was following the way of death and they're just a bad person and they should be penalized for that, or that person may have had a psychological disorder which has led them to feel that way and has led to murder. So I do believe that murder is wrong, but I don't believe that looking at a situation from two sides is wrong. I believe that if someone has a psychological disorder, that should be looked at by a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a team of providers in order to come up with a solution for that, because that person might have had a chemical imbalance or a poor upbringing which has led them to murder someone or act in that certain way. And if that person were to share those emotions before murdering to the Christian church, and the Christian church was able to help them overcome that, then maybe we could have stopped that person from murdering that other person in the first place. People that need to take this into consideration are teachers, mothers, and surgeons, and those are just a few examples. They need to always be thinking about things from two sides of the story, because as much as we would like things to be definitive, things aren't always as definitive as we would like. So now I'm just going to relate all three of my arguments and my thesis to something today in the 21st century. So I chose the process of surgery and how emotions play into that. So like I've explained before, the way of life is a strenuous procedure and so is surgery. Surgeons have to follow guidelines, very strict guidelines, and then specific steps in order to fix either that. I specifically talked about heart surgeons. So they had to follow these strict steps, just like Christians do if they want to become baptized and become a part of the Christian religion. So I said, however, emotion and imagination can be extremely key when an unfamiliar situation arises. So I understand that both Christians and surgeons should follow these strict paths. However, there are times when new and obscure situations arises, like if something during the heart surgery goes wrong and they don't know what to do, they didn't read about it in their textbook, they might have to think and use their emotions and use their own hearts to think how they can fix that heart. And however, on the opposite side, too much emotion can be destructive in the healthcare field today. So there are times that we have seen recently in the news that surgeons and other healthcare providers have been too emotionally invested into patients' lives and into the surgeries, that things have gone wrong for that reason. They take too much into consideration about getting to know them and getting too attached when they should be just following the procedures. But then on the other side of that as well, you do have to be open and use your emotions when you are a surgeon, because if you don't, then those people won't feel at home and they won't feel at ease before that surgery. So just to wrap it up, my final note is surgeons and Christians need to realize how emotions can be both destructive and positive at certain times. So my main point of my paper and of my thesis is that Christians shouldn't be told that they can never feel certain ways, but they have to realize that sometimes feeling these ways can be destructive. So they need to find, and the Christian religion needs to help Christians find the best way to cope with their emotions, both positively and negatively. Thank you.